This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room with breaking news. Another bombshell revelation about Russian election interference here in the United States. U.S. officials have told Senator Bernie Sanders that Russia is trying to help his Democratic presidential campaign. In a new statement, Senator Sanders says he stands firmly against Russia's efforts. And he says, unlike President Trump, he doesn't consider Vladimir Putin to be a good friend. This comes just a day after we learned that House members were formally briefed on Russia's efforts to help President Trump get reelected. Let's go right to Shane Harris. He's a CNN national security analyst, correspondent for The Washington Post. He first broke the story just a little while ago. Shane, thanks for your excellent reporting. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk a little bit about this. What did intelligence officials tell Senator Sanders about Russia's interference?
Well, we know that they told Senator Sanders that Russia was trying to assist his campaign. Now, we don't know exactly the form that assistance has taken. Senator Sanders spoke to reporters a little while ago and said he was briefed on this about a month ago. He didn't offer a lot of new details, but we do know that the intelligence community has been very attuned to watching for the ways that particularly Russia manipulates social media and tries to seed disinformation on those various platforms. And in a statement to the Post, Sanders actually kind of made a veiled reference to the possibility that some of his own online supporters might not authentically be who they claim that they are. So I thought that was a bit of a potential tell for what the substance of this briefing might be. But important to underscore, we don't know precisely the tactics that he was warned about.
Just a little while ago, Senator Sanders, Shane, spoke to reporters out in Bakersfield, California. I want to play this clip.
Let me just say a word about Russia. Mr. Putin is a thug. He is an autocrat. He may be a friend of Donald Trump's. He's not a friend of mine. And let me tell Mr. Putin, the American people, whether you're Republicans, Democrats, Independents, are sick and tired of seeing Russia and other countries interfering in our elections. The intelligence community has been very clear about it. Whether Trump recognizes it or not, or acknowledges it or not, they did interfere in 2016. The intelligence community is telling us they are interfering in this campaign right now in 2020. And what I say to Mr. Putin, if elected president, trust me, you are not going to be interfering in American elections.
Senator, when were you briefed on this?
I'm guessing about a month ago.
And what are you going to do now that you know this?
Well, it was not clear what role they're going to play. We were told that Russia, maybe other countries, are going to get involved in this campaign. And look, here is the message to Russia. Stay out of American elections. And what they are doing, by the way, the ugly thing that they are doing, and I've seen some of their tweets and stuff, is they try to divide us up. That's what they did in 2016. And that is the ugliest thing they're doing, is they are trying to cause chaos. They're trying to cause hatred in America. It's an ugly business. And all of us have got to say, sorry, you're not going to do this in this election. And again, as President of the United States, Mr. Putin, you will not interfere in our elections. Thanks very much.
How do you think it came out now, if you had the briefing a month ago?
Well, I'll let you guess about one day before the Nevada caucus. Why do you think it came out? No. Was the Washington Post? Good friends.
Not exactly sure what he meant by the Washington Post good friends, but Shane, what do you make of all of that?
Well, I think it's important to note what Senator Sanders is not saying, which is that he has doubts about the intelligence that he's been briefed on. He actually seemed to embrace it and really tried to draw a contrast between himself and President Trump, who he has repeatedly criticized for, in his view, not doing enough to actually combat disinformation and this kind of division online. I can also add, just from our subsequent reporting just in the past half hour or so since the story went up, we understand that President Trump has both been briefed, as we say in the story, on this assistance to Bernie Sanders' campaign, but also an analysis that Russia is trying to sow dissension within the Democratic primary field. So I think that gives us a little bit more insight into what Russia may be trying to do here, because it's a little bit discordant to think about them trying to help Bernie Sanders, but also, as we've reported, having a preference for President Trump. It does seem that there's at least some thinking that this Russian maneuver here is meant to sow dissension within this very crowded Democratic primary field.
Yeah, and we know that only the other day, last week, U.S. intelligence officials briefed members of the House Intelligence Committee that the Russians were trying to already interfering in the 2020 election with the goal of helping get President Trump reelected. So all of this unfolding as we speak. Shane Harris of the Washington Post, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your excellent reporting.
Thanks, Wolf.
All right, let's bring in our crime and justice correspondent, Shimon Prokopez, who's also working this story for us. The reality, Shimon, is that the Russians were trying to help the Sanders campaign back in 2016 when he was running for the Democratic presidential nomination against Hillary Clinton as well. And the Mueller investigation clearly showed that.
It did, Wolf. You're absolutely right. It did clearly show that the Russians were trying to help Bernie Sanders even as far back as 2016. And the whole point of that was they wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton, as you will recall. So this perhaps is not really new for the intelligence community, for the FBI, that the Russians would be so interested in helping Bernie Sanders so that he could ultimately wind up the nominee and, of course, face Donald Trump. The question becomes, what exactly did the intelligence community see? What exactly did the FBI see that concerned them so much that they would go ahead and brief the campaign about it? There had to be something. So that is now the question, certainly, as to what exactly prompted this, because to take this step would indicate that there was something that concerned them and they felt the need to go ahead and brief the campaign.
Based on what we've seen in the past, Shimon, is it likely that the interference by the Russians goes beyond just social media?
Right. It certainly does. We know about the social media efforts and the continued efforts by the Russians on social media to sow discord. This is the big thing in all of this, to create chaos, to create division. Very clear that is what they're trying to do. The other thing that you will recall from what we learned in the Mueller investigation, there were other tactics used here. There was money. They tried to use Americans, unwitting Americans in some cases, to give money to campaigns. There was also instances where they stole bank accounts of Americans, and then they used money from PayPal accounts. They created these accounts off of these stolen names and identities, and then they were using it to help and buy certain items for a campaign. The other thing is certainly there could be people here in this country who are Russians and seemingly acting to try and help the Bernie Sanders campaign. So it could be any number of those things. Social media is one aspect, but certainly there's a lot of other things that they could be doing that we just don't know about yet.
It's a very important development indeed. All right, Shimon, thank you very much. As we're learning about Russia's efforts to help Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign, President Trump is refusing to accept the U.S. intelligence community's assessment that Moscow is trying to help him get reelected as well. Let's go to our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. Jim, the president, in fact, has been lashing out about all of this.
That's right, Wolf. And we can report, we've confirmed that the president has been briefed on this briefing that was given to Senator Bernie Sanders about Russian efforts to interfere in his campaign, perhaps assist his campaign. But as you said, Wolf, President Trump is accusing Democrats of weaponizing this new intelligence briefing on Russian interference efforts in the 2020 election. But sources familiar with the briefing say this is more than just a threat from Russia tonight in the upcoming election. Moscow's meddling is apparently already underway. At a rally in Las Vegas, the president seized on what he views as the latest threat to his reelection. The U.S. intelligence community's warning that Russia is already interfering in the 2020 race to benefit Mr. Trump.
Disinformation. That's the only thing they're good at. That Putin wants to make sure I get elected. Listen to this. So, doesn't he want to see who the Democrat's going to be? Wouldn't he rather have, let's say, Bernie?
Earlier in the day, the president tweeted another misinformation campaign is being launched by Democrats in Congress, saying that Russia prefers me to any of the do-nothing Democrat candidates who still have been unable to, after 2 weeks, count their votes in Iowa. Hoax number 7. Sources tell CNN the president berated then acting director of national intelligence Joseph Maguire last week, one day after House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff and other Democrats clashed with Republicans during a classified briefing where DNI officials warned of the Russia threat. Days after Mr. Trump's heated meeting with Maguire, he tapped U.S. Ambassador to Germany Rick Grenell to be the new acting head at DNI. The top Republican on the Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, told the president what happened at the briefing.
Vladimir Putin is not running some operation with Donald Trump. There's no evidence of that. And so all this is they don't have anything to run on, and so they've got to make up Russia again.
Sources tell CNN committee Republicans, including Congressman Will Hurd, pressed intelligence officials for more proof that Moscow was meddling once again.
I can't comment on the specifics of the briefing, but what I can say is that, unfortunately, I think folks on the other side still have not internalized some of the conclusions from 2016, namely that the Russians interfered in that election on the president's behalf.
Mr. Trump's foe in 2016, Hillary Clinton, went on the attack, tweeting, "Putin's puppet is at it again, taking Russian help for himself. He knows he can't win without it, and we can't let it happen." The president has repeatedly questioned the intelligence community's conclusion that Russia interfered in 2016. His comments at the Helsinki summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin.
I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Came just days after former DNI Dan Coates warned U.S. elections are at risk.
And here we are nearly 2 decades later, and I'm here to say the warning lights are blinking red again.
With the Russians eyeing the 2020 election, the president appears to be struggling to find a new permanent DNI. After the president floated GOP Congressman Doug Collins for the position, the Georgia Republican said he didn't want it.
To mention my name and among others to be this position. But let me just tell you right now, I know the problems in our intelligence community, but this is not a job that interests me at this time. It's not one that I would accept.
Now, a source present for this briefing on Russian interference efforts said the information relayed to lawmakers made it clear that Russia has already begun interfering in the 2020 election. The source told me, quote, "Sure looks like it." Asked whether the information presented was alarming, the source responded, quote, "Very." Another thing we should note this evening is that the president's former acting attorney general Matthew Whitaker just touched on the Russian threat during an appearance at Oxford in the UK earlier this evening. He told the crowd there, quote, "I am never going to deny that Russia tried to interfere in 2016, they tried to interfere in 2018, and they're trying to interfere in 2020. Well, if that's from the president's former attorney general, question is whether or not the president will accept that information. Wolf.
We'll see if he does. All right, Jim Acosta, thank you very, very much. Joining us now, Congressman Denny Heck. He's a Democrat who serves on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. So, first of all, what's your reaction to Senator Sanders getting this formal briefing that Russia is also trying to interfere to boost his chances in 2020?
Well, Wolf, obviously anything I may have learned in that closed and classified briefing last week, I can neither confirm nor deny. But look, let me say this. I have not endorsed in this presidential race. I have no skin in this game. But I saw Senator Sanders' statement on this, and I find them to be highly authentic. Furthermore, I can guarantee you that Senator Sanders will never hold a press conference and openly invite Russia to interfere in our election like candidate Trump did, nor will anyone on Senator Sanders' staff ever meet with cutouts or operatives from the Russian government like those on behalf of candidate Trump did any number of times. And that's because Senator Sanders' position in this regard reflects the consensus opinion of Americans that foreign governments have no right to interfere in our elections, period, full stop.
Well, you heard Senator Sanders formally, publicly, just a little while ago, confirm that he was briefed by the U.S. intelligence community. He says maybe a month ago that the Russians were trying to interfere to help his campaign. Why do you think, Congressman, the Russians want to help the Bernie Sanders campaign?
Well, I think they do, in fact, want to sow division. It may be that they think Senator Sanders will be easier for President Trump, who's clearly their ally, to defeat, but I don't know that. In and of itself, sowing division seems to be a strong objective of theirs. But, you know, look, this is what we're going to get. This is President Trump. Denial that it ever happened. He's not going to change his colors. And after 3 years, anybody that thinks he's going to change his trajectory and cozying up to Russia, all paths, all roads lead to Putin, is whistling past the graveyard. This is who he is. And we can be outraged and have our heads explode or our hair catch on fire with this admittedly outrageous behavior, but it is what it is. And there's only one remedy, and it's November.
All this comes, and as you mentioned, after you and your colleagues on the House Intelligence Committee, Democrats and Republicans, received this classified briefing. And I understand you can't provide details on Russia's preference for President Trump to win re-election. The president, though, now publicly is calling all of this, in his words, a misinformation campaign launched by Democrats. What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
More of the same. It's, as I asserted earlier, Wolf, he denied it, even though the Mueller report laid it out abundantly clear that Russia interfered in the 2016 election with a preference for Trump to be elected. And they've been paid off, have they not? Let's just take a step back and look. When he was in Helsinki, he told the world that he believed Putin over the unanimous consent of his own intelligence community. Furthermore, when it came to the Ukraine, he withheld military assistance from our vulnerable ally, which Russia very much appreciated because they are occupying eastern Ukraine. And when it came to Syria, we turned our backs on our longest allies in the area, the Kurds, who had actually fought the war against ISIS on our behalf and gave 12,000 of their fellow Kurds lives up in defeating ISIS. And the Russians delighted in us turning our back on them. He's paid them off for their help of him in the 2016 election, and that alliance seemingly continues.
Congressman Denny Heck, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, we're going to have a lot more on the breaking news right after this.